To make a yarn octopus doll, you're going to need some yarn that's either 50-50 wool acrylic blend, or this one is, like I'm using, is 80% acrylic, 20% wool, 105 yards, and make sure it's a number 6 super bulky yarn. For the octopus head, I'm going to use a tennis ball, some yarn to tie the octopus tentacles after you're done braiding, and these are around 10 inches long. You're going to need about 8 pieces. You're also going to need 2 pieces of yarn about 12 to 15 inches long that's going to be used as a tie. To start, I'm using a piece of canvas that's 16 inches wide. To start, we're going to wrap yarn around the canvas like this. I'm going to keep wrapping it around. I'm going to do the whole entire keep repeating till all the yarn's used up. It should look like this when you're all finished wrapping the yarn around. Make sure you don't wrap too loose and not too tight. When you finish wrapping all the yarn, we're going to cut this side. Looks like this. We're going to cut the other side as well. This. A few pieces that we didn't. So now we have 2 strands. The next step, we're going to take all the strands, put them together, and a few inches down, we're going to take the yarn that we had cut earlier, tie it really tight. You're going to have a section that looks like this for the hair, and then the bottom. The next step is to place the tennis ball inside. These pieces back down to hide it. And then straighten out the strands of yarn a bit. Then we're going to get the other piece of yarn that we cut earlier. I'm going to use that to tie the tennis ball inside. And go around this way. Tie it really tight so it looks like that. The next step is to divide the strands. I have about 20 to 24 in each, if you want to count. and divide that into 8 sections. And take one of the pieces of yarn that we cut earlier, and we're just going to straighten it out a little bit. Tie them at the bottom, or you can use rubber band, that's just to keep them separate before you do the braiding. Makes it a little easier. Now we have 8 tentacles. We're ready to do the braiding. Just make sure the yarn's a little straight. To do the braiding, we're going to divide into 3 sections. One part over. And continue that all the way down. Right to the center, and then left to the center. Right to the center. Left to the center. Braid looks like that. You take the yarn that we cut earlier, wrap it around once, and then tie tightly. And there's one braided tentacle. We continue with all the other 7 till we have 8 braided. A little piece of yarn that we cut earlier, and tie it tightly. Double, or more if you prefer. And we're all done. And this is what it looks like with the 8 tentacles that you just braided. Next, it's time to decorate. I sewed 2 buttons on for the eyes and a little bit of yarn for the mouth. You can use felt or anything else you would like instead of buttons. And you can also use hot glue or E6000 glue instead of sewing. And there's your finished octopus doll. Cut 1 piece of yarn that's about 12 inches long. To begin, I wrapped 105 yards of yarn around canvas, and I'm using number 6 bulky yarn. The length of my canvas is 16 inches. Next, we're going to put the yarn that's about 12 inches long that we cut inside, and then we're going to tie a few times. And when you're done tying a few times, it's going to look like this. Cut the excess yarn that you knotted, And next we're going to slide the yarn off of the canvas. Make sure you slide and get it off gently. And this is what it looks like when you take it off of the canvas. Next, we're going to separate the yarn into 2 sections. And we're going to cut the bottom part where we didn't tie. This is what it looks like after you've cut the bottom, opposite from the side that you tied. Spread the yarn out a bit and place a tennis ball on the yarn. Put the other side of the yarn over the tennis ball. Next, we're going to tie a piece of yarn around the tennis ball, and it should look like this. After you're finished with that, you're going to split into 8 sections. Make sure they're equal sections. And we're going to braid each of the 8 sections of yarn. I counted 25 strands of yarn for each of the 8 tentacles or sections, and I tie them off with a piece of yarn. You could also use a rubber band or a clothespin or something just to keep them separate. I'm going to start with 1. I untied, and I'm going to separate the tentacle into 3 sections. We're going to start braiding. Straighten the 3 sections out a little bit, and then we can braid. When you're done braiding, you're going to tie tightly the end and continue doing the braid to the rest of the 7 tentacles, tying each one as you're done. And when you're all done braiding, it should look like this. You have 8 braided tentacles. I sewed 2 button eyes on the octopus and a piece of red yarn for the mouth. And here's the finished octopus yarn doll. And for this next one, I decided to try something different. I'm using 100% polyester yarn, and it's 6 super bulky, and it's also called blanket yarn. The yarn I'm using is Bernat Baby Blanket, and it's 220 yards. This type of yarn is very soft compared to the other one, if you're making it for like babies or children to play with. This would be the better yarn to use. The next step, you're going to cut 10 strands of yarn about 12 to 15 inches long. I'm using a 20-inch canvas, and I'm going to begin by wrapping the yarn around the canvas. This is what it should look like when you're done wrapping the yarn around, and I wrapped it around 100 times. Put the strand of yarn that you cut earlier inside, tie that tightly. Carefully remove the yarn from the canvas or whatever you had it wrapped around, and we're going to cut the end that's not tied. This is what it should look like when you're all done. Put your tennis ball in, wrap the tennis ball in. You just place the one part over the other to hide your tennis ball. Make sure your yarn is straight, and then we're going to tie around the ball. Tie that tightly And it looks like this when you're all done. First I counted 100 strands of yarn, and then I divided 8 sections of 25 strands each. That's 100 strands divided into 2 sections, so you can have 100 on one section, 100 on the other, a total of 200. And each of the 100 you're going to divide into 4 sections of 25 strands. 25 strands for each of the 8 legs. Divide each leg into 3 separate parts of about 8 strands each, and we're going to braid. When you're all done braiding, it'll look like this. You just have to tie it tightly when you're done at the bottom of the braid. And then you can trim to make the ends more even if you would like. Continue braiding till you're all finished with the other 7.